I got a question, and the way I've approached this question in the past is that I jump straight into the numbers and we start looking at prices, we start looking at all kinds of stuff. And sometimes, to be honest, yeah, maybe the desired effect is actually felt, but in this particular case, I want to do a little bit of inquiry a little bit before I actually give any recommendations. Shout out to our audience member, Egg Enjoyer. He said, "Brother, you need to bless us with a budget PC guide. I'm ready to make the leap." Now, I'm happy that you are looking at, possibly getting into the PC ecosystem, but there are some considerations that need to be put up front here. Because what I want to probably, go ahead and put as a caveat is your happiness factor and your enjoyment factor, because that's what you're doing here. You're coming to game on a PC platform. So, yes, a budget PC guide and all that stuff is all well and dandy, all well and good, but you have to realize and understand that there is that, weird, it's like a lagging sensation of missing out on something. So if you want to go budget, then you have to commit to the budget. You have to commit to the cost, to the numbers that you set up, and you've got to stay in that budget by any means possible. Meaning, if I give you a, kind of a roadmap, and that roadmap is X hundred amount of dollars, you're not really allowed to move out of that particular amount. In fact, even I will give you a cap of $50 and that's it. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere higher. If you were to be able to get lower, beautiful. But higher, you're not allowed to do that. Which would mean, though, that you will have some sacrifices that you have to make. It would also mean that you're more than likely going to have to be comfortable playing somewhere around 1080 for now. Not saying you can't play at higher resolutions. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to break this stuff down. And I'm going to pretty much be able to point out and say, okay, if this is the direction you want to go, if this is how you want to play it, let's jump into a few key things that would probably help you make sense of a PC build that will get the job done for you. Number one, the very first thing that you need to put into perspective if you want to do a budget PC are these numbers: 100 plus 200, meaning your CPU that you're going to buy. These are the two key pieces of this build. Your CPU should not be more than $100. Your GPU should not be more than $200. Do you hear what I'm saying? 100 and 200. That's it. That's the max that you're allowed to spend, in my opinion, for your CPU and GPU. Now, you may say, VG, where the heck am I going to get a $200 GPU that's going to be respectable? It's a very good question, and it's also part of the whole gimmick of actually staying within the budget and running all over the place. In fact, let me hook you up real quick. We can also move around those numbers tactfully. What I mean by that is, for instance, let's say we come up with a budget where we've already agreed that your GPU and CPU would be a total of $300, right? What if you could find a CPU for $80 and then now you could move that $20 into your GPU budget at $220? You haven't asked me about your motherboard. You haven't asked me about your RAM. You haven't asked me about your case and your power supply. These other items, they have their standard pricing in a sense, where case 50, power supply 60, about, because a CPU and GPU for $200 and $100 will only probably require a 600 watt power supply, maybe a 700 watt power supply, because they're not going to be huge power draws. They're not designed to do that because, again, they're working on the low end. So you can get away with the power supply that's not going to be too expensive on the market. It is from these different places that you can probably be able to now gain the benefit of being able to shift more money potentially into your GPU, because that's where you're going to have a lot of cost, just in case you find something that may still be within your budget that's probably more powerful than a raw $200 device. So, again, the first two things that we're talking about, CPU, GPU, once we have these two already set up, then we start to look around. All right? So let's dive in. This is one of my favorite CPUs that I enjoy recommending. I've used this CPU before. I have this CPU actually in builds for the kids, and I can tell you it is a very capable CPU on a budget. In fact, AMD would not stop making the darn thing. It's the Ryzen 5 5500. Perfectly capable, can run your games at 60 FPS, no problem. Now keep in mind that we're looking at everything 1080 all the way through 1440 if we can get away with it, because there are actually some $300 beauties that in the GPU side can carry you into the 1440 category, but it's only going to be you dipping your toes into it. You know, there's like sitting in 1440, like, okay, I'm here in 1440 and nothing can stop me GPU. But then there's like, oh, well, you know, I'm dipping my toes into 1440, but I own 1080. And when I say I own 1080, I own 1080 every day, all day. That smooth frame rate, that smooth, clean game performance, I'm going to enjoy it. Hence, the Ryzen 5 5500 is the sub $100 CPU that's going to give you that little thing that I'm talking about here. Now, you see this GOV Connections trying to sell it for $174. Get that out of here. Best Buy has it for $87. Newegg Business has it for $83.30. And then if you even look on Amazon, Amazon has it for also about $83.10. It's all depending on you, depending on where you're able to pretty much go ahead and lock in a device like this. If you really want to push the envelope, you know, again, you might think that a few dollars here and there is probably too much, but no. When you're making a PC build on a budget, $4 or $5, believe you me, is important enough until everything is already done being built. Don't get it twisted. When I built my first PC, fortunately, it was a different time in the market. But when I look at that time and look at this time, honestly, I think technology has been so good because I paid a little bit more than $100 for the CPU that I used, but the GPU was under $200 after a rebate. So again, we're now sitting at the $100 mark, and in terms of the CPU or less, and then for the GPU, you're probably wondering, where are we going to go with this? All right, this one's a little bit tricky because you're building on a budget, but here's the thing about a budget build. A budget build is a temporary build because eventually your goal and your plan as the engineer of this device is to eventually build the device into becoming what it is that you essentially had envisioned when you jumped into building the PC. However, were limited by the resources that you did have. You didn't have all the resources in the world when you started, hence a budget build, right? Which would mean that you now have to start taking a very close look at everything. Now, the beauty about this is on Amazon here, XFX has all their GPUs just splatted together. You can literally just hover your mouse around them and see what your dollar can buy you. You want a 7600 Swift. This is an 8 gigs graphics card, GDDR6. It will run you 1080 every game, all day, every day. No problem in terms of more of the general games. And if you want to know that a GPU like this can actually run your game, it's very simple. Just go on Steam and say, all right, this is the game that I want to play. I want to play, say, what is the latest and shiniest game that has come out more recently? Spider-Man 2. Let's say you want to play Spider-Man 2, right? And this is going to give you a very interesting idea as to other PlayStation games that are coming out. Spider-Man 2 is asking for a GTX 1650 or on the high end, an RTX 3060. A GTX 1650, ladies and gentlemen, is a baby graphics card. An RX 5500 XT is also an option. It's also asking for the possibility of an RX 5700. Well, I just showed you a 7600. So look at the numbers. AMD's numerical paradigm, for the most part, is slightly easier to be able to go ahead and understand. NVIDIA, they make it somewhat easy too, but again, in some cases, you'll find exceptions. But we're seeing this 5700. We just go and just look at our numbers and say, oh, okay, if we get a 6600, is that going to be better? Yes. If we get a 6500 XT, oh, look at that. Is that going to be better? The idea is possibly yes, maybe, you know what I mean? And so this is how you can kind of get yourself into that particular area to say, okay, this is possibly a game I can play. However, here's a problem. The VRAM size might limit you in terms of getting to other new games. Hence, what we're going to do is we're going to go here with 8 gigs, the 7600, which is going to run us somewhere around $269 is what they're asking for it. No, that's not that's the 7600, right? 7600 is a little bit less than this. Actually, no, $269, almost $300, right? Now, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, when we kicked off this particular build, we started out and said $200 for our GPU, $100 for our CPU. So now that we got a CPU for about $83, we have like, I don't know, $17 to throw on top of that, $200, which still keeps us in the, which still keeps us a little bit under our $270 mark. So we're still short, no problem. Let's keep hunting. The next piece is going to be our RAM. And this is where I say you're probably going to be able to shave off another $20 that you're going to throw to that GPU money. Watch and see. All right. Now, everybody's, PC building philosophy is different. Mine is very different. If you want to do a budget build, I'm probably one of the people you should be talking to. But some people, when they see what I call a budget build, they yell, they freak out. I've seen some PC gamers immediately basically start lambasting me because I suggested that you buy something that's affordable, that your wallet can actually afford. They go crazy, they lose their minds. If you want to buy RAM, you can buy, 32 gigs of RAM, Corsair Vengeance. This is actually $48.99. To be very honest, this thing is dirt cheap. Back in the day when DDR4 was the RAM of choice and we didn't have DDR5, you wanted to buy yourself DDR4 Corsair, you'd be paying close to $70, $80. Now, because DDR4 is on the back end of things, it is now super, affordable. However, don't do that yet. In fact, you need $20 over here somewhere to be able to get you that $269 that you need for that particular GPU of yours, of which that GPU, honestly, is right now overpriced. It usually goes for around $230. I'm just going with the flow. Say you wanted to jump in the market today, let's do that. Say it was, maybe a few months ago, like during the holiday season, you would have bought that GPU for $230 something, no problem. And I would advise you and say, hey, by all means, come here and get yourself some Corsair 32 gigs. But it's okay. 16 gigs is not the end of the world. Why? You can easily just scale that up. This is the beauty of building a PC, is you can scale your device to actually go. So now, instead of me allowing for you to basically go below $50 on your, RAM, you're only going to spend $21. So the shortage that we had for our GPU, where we were only able to come up with about $217 out of $263, we have now supplemented with an extra $20. So we're now getting close. We're closer to $240, and $20-something is all we need to be able to capture our GPU budget. Now, do you see what I'm doing here? I'm pretty much making sacrifices in different places to be able to go in and squeeze in all of my components within a budget framework. You can take this exact same approach and scale it to a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 build, because again, it's just all about what it is that you want. It's all about how it is that your budget can actually carry things. But you're going to have to tell yourself, at this budget that we're talking about in terms of a low end, this is where I'm going to be able to enjoy my gaming for now. Because don't worry, you buy a 7600, GPU today, it's not the end of the world. I know a lot of people may say, but a 7600 won't be able to help you do whatever. You played this on console and all that stuff. I get it. But the moment you get yourself a gaming PC, for crying out loud, that gaming PC can become some kind of a juggernaut, because all you do is you pretty much change the internal components within it. I have a PC case that I've had since the PS4 days, and the kinds of computers I've actually built inside of this thing, I mean, it's insane how much computing power I've been able to put in this case. It's transformed over the years to be able to carry builds that are, significantly better in terms of where I started from and in terms of where that particular, device right now has actually gone within that case. As for the case, as for your motherboard, as for your power supply, those things are quite standard in terms of pricing, because again, we're using a small CPU and a small GPU. So our wattage, it's not going to be more than 600 watts. I don't think so. So 600 watt power supply, I mean, what's that going to do? What's that going to do in terms of, cost right here? That's going for somewhere around $40. I mean, and that's a Thermaltake one. If you want to go for, say, maybe another brand, some people, they'll swear by the brand or whatever it is. You can spend a little bit more money, buy yourself an EVGA. I recommend EVGA power supplies every time. I recommend the Thermaltake in this particular case, this particular brand, which is, I think, called the Thermaltake Smart. That's what this one is called, and it's doing a good job on some of the builds I've used it for. I did get another Thermaltake this holiday period, the GF, whatever the heck it is, GF3 Tough Power, and it fried the other day. Thankfully, it just died. It wasn't anything complex, and so which is weird. It's only been about 2 months since I've used it, so I won't recommend Tough Power. I'd recommend Smart because Smart's been doing a good job for me. It's just that simple. But by and large, you can go to PC Part Picker and you can take this approach and do this exercise. Now, as you're doing this exercise, you're also going to go ahead and be looking at reviews. You're going to be looking at opinions. You're going to be looking at what people think. The most important thing in all of this is when you look at a configuration of a CPU and a GPU, you go on YouTube and you go ahead and look it up and say, how is this CPU and GPU going to go ahead and play my favorite game? That's another thing a lot of people don't really do when they look at when they're trying to build a PC, when they're trying to get a PC set up. For instance, I play Gotham Knights. So RX 7600, and I'll say Gotham Knights. And I'll see how that runs on that particular build. This person has a Ryzen 7 5700X. They have a daylight mod. No, this person has a 7600 in 24 games. In testing 50 games. I click it and I go straight. I want to see how this particular PC is going to do. Let me look at their CPU. What CPU are they using? They don't really say. Oh, they do say. They're using an i7 13700, which is actually a really solid CPU. But for now, I just want to see how that GPU is going to work. And then later I can do some more tests in that regard. And you could just come out here and look at something like this where they have a number of games that are all out there. Let me see where their Gotham Knights is on here. Ghost of Tsushima. Oh, they don't have Gotham Knights. Oh, they did it alphabetically. Wow, that's actually quite detailed. Well, let's just try God of War. I mean, right? 2730. And let's see what that looks like in God of War. So you see their settings. They'll do their settings, and they'll show you exactly what their settings will look like. It's the 7600 over here. Let's go ahead and blow this up for you. It's 1080. Aspect ratio is auto. VSync is off. FSR2 is off and everything. Let's see how it performs with a game like God of War. Now, this test is old. It's from last year, June. 1080 Ultra. What is their average FPS? Average FPS is 70, 80 FPS. 77 FPS. That's the average FPS in this fight with Baldur. Okay. You look at it and say, okay, 95 FPS. Okay, not bad. They go to GTA 4, GTA 5, Hitman 3, Hogwarts Legacy. Let's look at Hogwarts Legacy. In the air, in the skies. Hogwarts Legacy is kind of like an open area, open view. They're basically flipping the camera around to see where things would be. And frame rates at 1080p, quite decent. Now, the CPU is also helping, but again, I said for now, let's just kind of, put the CPU aside, but let's see what this GPU can actually get work done, right? Because again, if we have to basically, improve that CPU, then we'd have to pretty much go ahead and figure out, okay, this is what a CPU of that nature can do, of which, if you want to get a CPU that would probably be able to compete with this CPU, you have to go to the 5600, which is, I think it's like $40 more in terms of the CPU, but again, that's not really the 5500 and 5600, they perform almost the same. What is this game? This is Mad Max. This is an old game. This is Mafia Definitive Edition, Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. Let's see what that does. That's doing 100 FPS. Ooh, 1080p. Oh, 1440. Okay, this is where I told y'all. Remember, sometimes with FSR, you can dip your toes into 1440, but that's not gonna be a normative aspect in that regard. NFS Underground, Power World, Prince of Persia, Rogue, Red Dead Redemption 2, so it's a whole nother game. 40 FPS, 1080p Ultra. Okay, you're not doing 60 FPS. It's a demanding game, so some games will test your, setup, and that's how it goes. Resident Evil Village, this is a lot of indoorsy for this game. It's kind of curated environment, so every polygon that's in each scene is accounted for, so you can get a bunch of FPS out of it. So max FPS, this person is getting for this particular play area 170 FPS, and you're getting this is at 1440 with this particular GPU. Rise of Tomb Raider, they use the Tomb Raider series to do a lot of GPU and CPU testing. So this is also something you need to know about. So when you see it in, GPU tests, even if it's an old game, it's one that actually is very, well known for being in a position where it pushes your GPU. And this game seems to be running it very well. Although they're not running one of the more tasking areas, it still is nice for you to be able to look and say, okay, this is where this GPU is probably going in terms of this. Hellblade Senua's Saga. Yep, this is doing 55 FPS. Very demanding game. I don't know if this is the more tasking area. Sniper Elite 5. This is an FPS. This is probably going to be doing a lot of beautiful FPS for you. 105 FPS. Yeah, not even a problem. Starfield. Oh, let's look at what this is. Starfield of June 2024. Doing around 50-something FPS. So you're going to get mixed results at the end of the day. Last of Us Part 2, this is going to be a little hard. Last of Us Part 1, sorry. It's going to be a little hard in some areas where it's going to test out your 8 gigs of VRAM. But you're playing, if you play at 1080, you're going to be able to go ahead and take advantage of, the fact that you're not necessarily pushing your GPU too much and you're getting the most out of it. So this is the approach that I would take if I was building a budget build in today's market. There's a lot that's going on. Now, this is all brand new parts, by the way. If you go ahead and take something like this, you end up with maybe a 5-ish, 600-ish. If you press and squeeze really hard, you'll find yourself close to, $600 because of some inflated prices for GPUs, because we haven't looked at the motherboard yet. We haven't looked at a few other things, but you'll be able to get yourself a solid 1080p device. This is actually somewhat close to what Dark has in his PC, but he's building on AM5. Motherboards for AM4, around $80, $90 when you put it all together and such. And this is basically what you're going to come close to at the end of the day. So I hope this kind of helped. This just kind of gave like a quick overview on the technique that you use to basically go ahead and maximize every dollar. If we wanted to break down a detailed look in terms of other things, I mean, we could sit here for hours doing all this stuff, man. So talk to me in the comment section. I hope that was helpful. Egg Enjoyer. Peace out.